today we have Dr. Elroy Vojdani, founder of Regenera Medical, and someone who's made a huge impact on both of our personal health journeys. So we are so grateful to have him here. He's Natasha's functional doctor. I also see his practice for my own care. So we have deep respect for you and your whole practice, everyone there. And in case you missed it, one of our all-time top rated episodes was the last time we had him on, and it was all about perimenopause and menopause. So we're going to link that here so you can make sure if you missed that one to go back, or you want to re-listen to it for some reason, go back.
I think we just also have to highlight Dr. Vojdani. He is an MD immunologist, and he literally got Emily off her Remicade because she has colitis. My husband, who is anaphylactic to tree nuts and peanuts, he is no longer allergic to any of those things except Brazil nuts, but not anaphylactic at least. But he completely cured his gut and has done such amazing things. And he's just absolutely brilliant. And I can't say enough amazing things about him.
Yes, we are big fans. So today we are diving deep into one of the most talked about topics, GLP-1s, the drugs behind Ozempic, Wegovy, and Mounjaro. And we'll unpack the latest research. And we have a lot of questions.
Mm-hmm. Good. I'm ready for them. I'm excited.
And maybe we'll let you talk now.
Well, thank you for the kind words. I'm gushing. I love having conversations with the two of you. So thank you for having me on, and thanks for saying nice things.
So for listeners new to GLP-1s, what exactly are they and how do they work in the body beyond appetite suppression?
Okay, this is going to be a little bit of an unwrapping because I think we understand them very differently than we did maybe 4 or 5 years ago when they really started flooding the market. So GLP-1s are peptides. So first step, they are a synthetic peptide, which basically means it's a small piece of a protein. We as human beings use large proteins as communication or messaging tools. So we're basically picking the littlest piece of the protein that has the action that we would like, synthesizing it, and then essentially hijacking our own messaging systems potentially for our benefit. That's essentially what a peptide is. GLP-1s are by far the most famous of all of the peptides that are out there right now, but we have many peptides that we use in the medical space.
So are the peptides you buy online, like the peptides like Be Well by Kelly is selling? What are those?
Oh, we dove right into the rabbit hole, huh, Emily?
I'm here for the hard-hitting questions.
Okay, so again, just to zoom out on peptides, there are peptides that are officially approved by the FDA, are sold by pharmaceutical companies directly, and also are in the compounding space, meaning they would come from a compounding pharmacy as well. Those include the 2 GLP-1s that everybody talks about, which are Semaglutide, sold as the brand name Ozempic, and Tirzepatide, which is Mounjaro. There are hundreds of other peptides that do lots and lots and lots and lots of potential things, from the glow stack that everybody's seeing online to healing peptides to anti-aging growth hormone secreting peptides. The overwhelming majority of those are living in a very gray area, non-medical space right now on the internet, where this is not regulated in any real fashion and you're not getting it from a pharmacy 9 times out of 10. So the GLP-1 conversation and the peptide conversation they're like, we'll be on here for 6 hours talking about this if we kind of dive into the whole thing. But to kind of answer the question about the most commonly used, I think, peptide in today's world right now, it's definitely GLP-1s. GLP-1 stands for glucagon-like peptide 1, and it binds to a receptor in the body. And it really, I think when we initially looked at it, thought of it as a thing that slows down the stomach, and from there makes you not want to eat because you feel sick to your stomach from the sensation. And from there, it's a weight loss drug, basically. And I think
main thing you want people to know about this drug? Like, what should people know? Everyone's talking about it. What's your main takeaway?
I think the most fascinating part of the GLP-1 category is that we're now learning that they are what we call immuno-metabolic tools. In other words, the space of medicine is really, at least in the scientific discussion, transforming a lot in the way that we look at chronic health. We've had a lot of conversation in 2024 and 2025 about metabolic health. People like Casey Means and other people really kind of harping on this. I think maybe landscape before was talking a lot about chronic inflammation, gut stuff, food sensitivities. And the most fascinating thing is that those two things are absolutely interconnected and you can't separate them as different discussions anymore. So in other words, the metabolic state of an individual and the inflammatory state of the individual are interconnected. And you have to look at something like a GLP-1 again and kind of say, okay, well, we thought that these were, shut off your hunger drive, strict weight loss drugs. It turns out that they, number one, alter your metabolism. And number two, alter your inflammatory position from an immune system perspective. So I now envision these things as immuno-metabolic tools. So things that kind of help you on the inflammatory side and the metabolic side at the same time. And now, again, that we know those two things are directly connected to each other, that shouldn't be surprising that something like a GLP-1 has that effect.
So what kind of inflammatory effects are you seeing?
So the data, we actually do have some data on this now on semaglutide, and there's going to be tons and tons more data coming out because there are trials right now with semaglutide looking at the treatment of Alzheimer's, the prevention of Alzheimer's, the treatment of autoimmune conditions. I mean, it's going to be discussed really everywhere. I'm sure we'll even start having conversations about cancer and GLP-1 as well too.
Wow.
But the data
In
right
a
now,
positive way or in a negative way?
no, in a positive way, I
Okay.
think. Yeah, I mean, the initial scare was that it was going to trigger potential thyroid cancer in people with genetic predispositions. And that original data looks to not be playing out to be true in the population data. So some of those initial cancer scares are actually, I think, probably going to be put to bed here. And because cancer is glucose fueled and there's metabolic dysfunction at the core of kind of the immune dysfunction that leads to cancer, something like a GLP-1 might actually help prevent the spread of something like a known cancer. So,
whoa,
yeah. We're entering quite a world going forward here. So, the anti-inflammatory data on GLP-1 say very clearly that somebody who has some type of chronic inflammatory disorder is going to get a direct anti-inflammatory benefit. So the immune analysis before and after using a drug like that will say all these inflammatory things that were happening are going to be decreased when the person starts a GLP-1.
How are drugs like semaglutide and Tirzepatide different, and what makes the dual agonist version so powerful?
And we'll actually continue that conversation with the third compound that's going to be hitting the market very soon. So semaglutide is, I think, the evolution of the original versions of these drugs. So it really only targets that one receptor, which is GLP-1. And then Mounjaro came around afterwards, which is Tirzepatide. And they developed a new compound that binds, it's still a peptide, but it binds to two different receptors at the same time. So it binds to the GLP-1 and it binds to another receptor called GIP. And what GIP is a little bit more interesting. It actually has more direct brain effect. So rather than controlling hunger just by making you kind of like sick to your stomach, which is what a semaglutide drug does, the GIP goes into the brain receptor and actually takes down your drive to consume food. And a lot of people have thrown this word around of food noise. Basically at the times where your body doesn't really need nutrition, but your brain's kind of screaming at you, give me that muffin there in the corner.
Right.
Tirzepatide really does a very good job of shutting that off, which is fascinating. I envision that compound as much more of a brain compound than it is a gut compound.
Are they seeing that Tirzepatide doing the same thing with addictions like alcohol addictions and things like that?
Yeah, maybe more so than semaglutide. So again, that's another very, very interesting area. GLP-1s, and the reason I became originally familiar with them 8, 9 years ago when I started the practice was actually in off-label use for things like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, because there were already human trials going on based on animal data that those compounds would help those neuroinflammatory conditions. So it was never a surprise to me to see this kind of evolution, but very clearly semaglutide helped people with food addiction and alcohol and smoking addictions at the same time.
Wow.
Tirzepatide actually seems to do that a little bit more. And I think that's because of that more specific GIP brain stuff that's going on with that compound. That's where you're seeing the kind of like opening of these potentially being used in tons of different spaces.
So are GLP-1s treating the symptoms of metabolic dysfunction, or are they truly just helping to heal the root cause?
That's a great question, and I'm very happy you asked that, because that's probably my most important takeaway with GLP-1s. Everybody wants to jump on these, I think, immediately these days based on social posts and everything that they're hearing in their circle. And I say, no, 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 no. This is not a solution. This is something that might help you get to your destination. It's a tool to use, but it absolutely is not the answer. It is not solving your problem. Your problem is the metabolic and immunological dysfunction that comes from today's world. We're stressed. We're just wired from all the information that we're getting. We're exposed to toxins and chronic inflammatory foods all the time. Our metabolism is completely hijacked by what we're eating these days. And you're not going to fix that with a GLP-1. You are going to Band-Aid some of that and mask it with a GLP-1. And you are not actually going to fully solve the problem. I don't see that as a viable solution on its own by any stretch of the imagination. It's a small piece of the conversation, and for some people, a very useful tool to get to their clean, healthy living. But it's only a small part.
Same trend thing. Can you talk about the microdosing and what the research is around that? Because I know there's a lot out there about the microdosing, and it seems that there's not that much research.
So let's talk about why the traditional dosing exists the way that it does. Ozempic was originally marketed for the usage in type 2 diabetes and then got secondary application to weight loss. Mounjaro, same thing, initially type 2 diabetes and then weight loss. So the only outcome metric that the pharmaceutical company is interested in is the one that provides them a marketing advantage when they're trying to sell this drug. So in type 2 diabetes, it's all about the fastest and largest drop in hemoglobin A1C, which is the marker that we physicians use to kind of judge where is the person in their health journey, right? And in weight loss, the most amount of weight loss in the shortest period of time, okay? That's why the traditional dosing structures for Ozempic, Mounjaro exist. They're designed to get max on paper for those two diseases results in, let's say, 6 months. So the rep can walk into your office and say, well, our drug got this in 6 months compared to their drug that got this in 6 months. And then the physician says, oh my God, I'm going to prescribe this medication from now on. That's literally how these doses are designed, okay? Does that necessarily mean that at their pre-selected versions, are they the best for the long-term health outcome of the individual? Because we know that one of the unexpected or unintended side effects of these drugs is you lose a lot of muscle if you're taking big doses in short periods of time. Your body's just saying, okay, no fuel, the body's eating less, and it's going to start kind of internally breaking up your fat, but also your muscle.
Wait, can we highlight that again? I want to highlight that again. When you take these drugs like Ozempic, Mounjaro, what happens?
If you take relatively large doses of these drugs and you're not building a normal foundation for yourself from a health perspective, meaning eating clean, exercising, sleeping, your body will break down fat, but it will also break down muscle. And losing muscle, as far as like healthy aging is concerned, is an absolute no-no. So there are, I think, unintended negative side effects of kind of following the traditional dosing scheme that exists in the pharmaceutical world for these drugs.
So how do you monitor for nutrient deficiencies or muscle loss or other side effects that might develop with someone on this drug?
Yeah, I mean, for the muscle stuff, it's pretty easy. You can do something as simple as an in-body scan, which is a fancy scale that through electrical density tells you basically it's your muscle and fat composition, and we'll track that for all patients and make sure that they're not losing a massive amount of muscle percentage-wise. The better choice would be to do a DEXA scan. DEXAs are 35, 40 bucks. They take 15 minutes. They're all over the place these days. And from there, you're tracking what's your body fat and muscle composition over time. And if somebody starts slipping off the curve and they're losing weight, but it's happening predominantly from muscle mass, we stop and we have a conversation. We say, what are you doing? What's your protein intake looking like? Are you doing any weight-bearing exercise? Don't lose the foundations of this because you're on this compound.
By the way, can we talk about, because Natasha went to this longevity, Peter Attia, what's his name?
Attia.
Peter Attia. He was on 60 Minutes last week, and Natasha also went to a conference with him. And I believe in the notes, because she was sending me gibberish throughout the conference, which was basically notes from the conference. And one of the things was that I think every person should be getting a DEXA scan at a certain age. And then also, because we touched upon Alzheimer's, that everybody should be getting that genetic testing for Alzheimer's, which I just recently got in your office. And I'm happy to report I don't have the gene, Natasha.
That wasn't at Peter Tia's talk, but yes, that was at the Gladstone Institute. But yeah.
Oh, well, good that I could keep up with your notes.
Yes, it's okay.
So I agree with both of those things for sure, but I'll put a little bit of a different lens on the gene part of it because I think it's an important part of the discussion. So yeah, unfortunately with in today's world, because of the chronic inflammatory and poor nutrient stuff that's going on, osteoporosis is absolutely rampant. So getting a DEXA just for knowing your bone mineral density, let alone what your body fat composition is, an extremely important objective tool to find out where you are. And we have had miraculous cases where people go from full-blown osteopenia to normal bone mineral density by getting them back on just the healthy principles of eating and supplements like vitamin D3 and K2. So this is a reversible thing that doesn't necessarily need medication to be able to get yourself out of these situations. You just have to understand that chronic inflammation is going to drive the bones to be weak, and reversing that can make them strong.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Good to know.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of things are possible when you look at things with open eyes. So on the Alzheimer's side, so we're talking about APOE genetics. Dr. Attia is very, very big on doing APOE genetics. You might have caught him on that National Geographic series that he did, I think, on Apple TV or something like that as well, too.
No, but I kind of want to watch that now.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you this. I think it's a little bit over amplified in how much it potentially means. There is data that says that if you have a single copy of APOE4 versus the default, which is called APOE3, there's maybe a 1 to 1.5x increase of late onset Alzheimer's. If you have two copies of APOE4, perhaps a 4 to 6-fold increase in late onset Alzheimer's. I think the more fascinating information and research on the space is from a neurologist named Dale Bredesen, who's a real genius and has learned and understood that APOE genetics are not actually like destination Alzheimer's genetics. What they are, or they say that basically program the inflammatory pathway in the brain to be hyperactive. So if you imagine that a hyperactive inflammatory pathway in the brain is kind of meeting all the things in today's world, they're more likely to end up with something like Alzheimer's as the end result of all that inflammation, not directly because of the genes. And that means that these are modifiable genetics or modifiable risk factors. If you find out that you have a copy or two copies of APOE4, And my wife does have 2 copies of APOE4. So I tell her all the time she married the right person. If you kind of meet that increased risk with an anti-inflammatory, metabolically clean lifestyle, you're going to negate what those genes tell you is a 6-fold increased risk. And the future of Alzheimer's is going to be very, very, very different, where we do early detection with blood testing, implement anti-inflammatory lifestyles, maybe envisioning things like GLP-1s being used in that space, and you can definitely hold back from the development, progression of something like Alzheimer's or other forms of dementia. It's another space where I think, again, in 5 years, the practice will be totally different where it is now.
Can you share how you combine lab testing and nutrition and lifestyle with or without GLP-1 medications to kind of get sustainable results?
Yeah, you guys know I'm a huge believer in reliable data driving the modern way of practicing medicine. If we're basically doing precision, personalized medicine, and the only way to do that is to have reliable data. The kind of principle, again, is get a full set of metabolic data, fasting glucose, insulin, triglycerides, maybe information from a continuous glucose monitor, basic inflammatory markers. Pair that with our very in-depth immune analysis, which is where is your immune system? Where is your gut? What are the food sensitivities? Where's the toxin exposure? And combine those two things into a treatment algorithm and monitor those data sets as time goes on. So basically work on the metabolic side, work on the inflammatory environmental side. They meet in the middle in synergy with each other. And people have dramatic success with that kind of like outlook on health. You just keep checking the data periodically over time. More as a reinforcement for the person tool. Human beings love seeing physical manifestations of success and laboratory manifestations of success. So it kind of like continues the encouragement, and you just keep going. This is a space where we learn something new every 3, 4, 5 months, and we always bring those things into the practice.
You're very good about doing that. So are there functional medicine alternatives like berberine or all of that people can consider? And you mentioned that the peptides for sale online may not do the trick.
Dr. Vojdani will answer that question and more next week. We will air the second part of this podcast, so stay tuned.
This podcast does not constitute medical advice or recommendation. Please consult your doctor.